Do you like surprises? I can't say I'm a huge surprise kind of guy. I'm much too a control freak to allow other people to kind of control my day. But every once in a while, there's a great surprise. Got a video clip of one. This takes place as a pre-game event to a Boston Bruins hockey match back in November. So please watch the video screen.
Ladies and gentlemen, on this Veterans Day weekend, and during Boston Bruins Military Appreciation Month, we direct your attention to center ice for a very special ceremonial puck drop. In honor of those who have served this country, those currently active in our armed forces, and the families of these brave men and women, tonight we welcome the parents of Lieutenant Charles Jacobs of the 182nd Infantry of the Massachusetts Army National Guard, who is actively serving overseas in Afghanistan. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Darren and Lori Jacobs of Pembroke, Massachusetts. Mr. and Mrs. Jacobs, we have a very special surprise for you tonight. To present you with the puck for our ceremony, on leave after spending the past 7 months living in Afghanistan, please welcome home your son, Lieutenant Charles Jacobs.
Isn't that a great clip? I can't watch that without tearing up. I must have seen it 20 times, and it still has that power. Imagine the surprise of that mom and dad to see their son home. What a great experience. Do you suppose that Mary and Peter and John had a similar experience when they saw Jesus? Can you imagine that? No, you can't imagine that. You know why you can't? Because you've never gone to a cemetery to grieve somebody who has passed away only to encounter them. It hasn't happened, has it? Last year, my wife Dan and I went to our 30-year class reunion from college. And one of my classmates came up to me. I hadn't seen him in 30 years, and he said, "I thought you were dead." I mean, what do you say to that? I said, "I thought you were good looking. I bet we're both wrong." So Peter, James, and John, they go, or Peter and John and Mary go, and they're expecting to send their friend off into eternity, to say goodbye. And yet they say hello. Now, in my situation, that was a case of bad information. My friend had bad information, but Peter and John and Mary, they had good information. I mean, they were there. They saw Jesus on the cross. They helped take the body down from the cross. They put the body in the tomb. This was not a matter of bad information. Jesus was dead. But surprise, he's alive. Now, was that good or bad news? Now, it depends. If you're Mary, this was great news. Mary may have been closer to Jesus than even any of the disciples. And so when she saw Jesus, she grabbed a hold of Jesus. She didn't want to ever let go of Jesus. But it wasn't necessarily good news for Peter. Peter may have been one of Jesus' closest disciples, but he messed up big time. When it mattered most, he messed up the most. He denied Jesus, knowing Jesus. Not just once, but 3 times. Can you imagine having one of your best friends called to the witness stand to be a character reference for you and having him or her say, "You know what? I really don't know this person very well at all." Quite a disappointment. So Peter is scared. I mean, he has reason to be scared. If it's true that Jesus is alive, he's coming after Peter. And Jesus does come after Peter. He hunts him down. He gets to Peter while Peter is locked behind a door that night. And Jesus shows up, and you know what Jesus does? He forgives Peter. And he doesn't just forgive Peter, he gives Peter the Holy Spirit, and he says, okay, now you have been forgiven. Go and forgive other people. And what we discover is that this is now the way that Jesus works. He is going to pursue people. He is going to hunt them down. He is going to surprise them with his love. A couple years later, there's this guy, his name is Saul. He has the job of hunting down this new religious sect called the Christian Church. He's a Pharisee. And it's been given to him to cleanse the Jewish tradition from any group, such as this sect, from impurity. And so Paul, he's on this road to a city called Damascus. And there he's going to go after the Christians. But while on this road, surprise, Jesus shows up. And Paul falls to the ground off of his horse, and Jesus says to him, these are my words, I want you to come play for my team now. I mean, if you read your Bible, especially if you read the book of Acts, you discover that this is now how Jesus is going to show up. People are going to be minding their own business, they're going to be doing the things that they normally do, and then all of a sudden, surprise, Jesus is going to show up. And he's going to change everything. These stories, they're not just found in the Bible. If you were to spend time looking at the history of the Christian church, you would find story after story after story about how Jesus surprises people with his love, with his grace. There's this guy, his name is Frank. And Frank lives in this little Italian town in the 12th century. He comes from a wealthy family. So Frank is a spoiled brat. He enjoys women. He enjoys partying late into the night. Frank loves having a good time. And in those days, it was the custom for young men to show their strength, their manliness, by joining the army and going off and fighting silly wars. And so Frank did that. And it was while he's on the battlefield, Jesus shows up. And it so radically changes Frank's life that he goes home back to his little town in Italy. He joins the monastery. Well, you might know him as Francis of Assisi. A couple years later, in the middle 1900s, there was this guy by the name of Clive Staples Lewis. C.S. Lewis. And Lewis was an agnostic. He had no time for thought of God. He lived his life in academia, and he did quite well. But he tells of an interesting situation in a book that he wrote entitled Surprised by Joy. That one day, while he and his friend were taking a motorcycle ride to a zoo outside of London. And here's what he wrote. When we set out, I did not believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. And when we reached the zoo, I did. That's it. Not very spectacular, is it? I mean, but what would you expect from the British? Another story. Also taking place in England. Young man by the name of Francis Thompson also comes from a family of pedigree and wealth. His father was a well-known surgeon. This is in the late 1800s. And Francis wanted to become a priest. So get this, he spends 6 years in college to become a priest, and they reject him. So then he figures he'll become a doctor like his father. Problem is that while he is training to be a doctor, he becomes an addict to opium. That doesn't go well. Francis's mother dies, and that's when his world falls apart. He is found out about his opium addiction. He gets kicked out of medical school. He has an argument with his father, and they never again speak. Francis heads into London, and in order to confront his opium addiction, he spends days upon days at a variety of monasteries around London. Oh, and he would write poetry. Maybe the most famous of Francis Thompson's poems is entitled The Hound of Heaven. Maybe you've heard of this. It starts this way. I fled him. Down the nights and down the days, I fled him. Down the arches of the years. I mean, clearly a guy on the run. Clearly a guy who simply had no desire, no time whatsoever for God, and his life reflected that. But then, he gets to the end of this poem. Shades of his hand outstretched caressingly. Ah, fondest, blindest, weakest, I am he whom thou hast seekest. Thou driven love from thee who drives me now. Surprise. Saul, or Paul as we also know him, St. Francis of Assisi, C.S. Lewis, Francis Thompson, these people were not looking for Jesus, but Jesus came looking for them. He was not what any of them expected. And in their encounter with Jesus, they would receive something that they never before imagined. But this is the way of God. That's the pattern of the resurrected Jesus. This God whose love is so great that even though we might try to dismiss him, disdain him, or even kill him, he'll come looking for us. He will pursue us. We often like quoting Psalm 23, and why not? It's such a warm and comforting psalm about this loving shepherd of a God. When we get to the end of the psalm, we read, surely his goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It's kind of nice. Leaves you with a feeling that goodness and mercy comes to those who God is their shepherd. But the verb to follow is also the verb to pursue in Hebrew. And so maybe the psalm makes just a little bit more sense if we hear this. Surely goodness and mercy will pursue me all the days of my life. That's the reality of what we're talking about today. God is on the loose. God is a God of the resurrection, and he is after you. Now you might think this is bad news, because after all, I know many of you, you are not the most righteous people in the world. But in reality, that's the best of news. Because he pursues you not with judgment and wrath, but with goodness and mercy. I mean, this Jesus wants to win you over with his love. I know how strange this sounds. Our modern world does not allow us to consider this as an alternative reality. I mean, years of education have taught us that we are the architects of our own destiny, and we ought not trust voices beyond ourselves that would interrupt our lives and redirect our attention. I think you can learn a lot about our culture by watching theologically informed television. There are some shows out there that really help us understand who we are in light of God's love. One such show is The Simpsons. How many of you watch The Simpsons? Maybe you remember this episode. Homer, the dad, pledges money to a PBS telethon drive only because he is sick and tired of them asking for money. But he doesn't really have the money that he pledges. And when the PBS people find this out, they force him to serve with some missionaries on an isolated island someplace. Now, the job that these missionaries are doing is building a church. Homer is not the most theologically astute person in the world. And so he says this, well, I don't know much about God, but we sure built him a nice little cage. And you know what? For a lot of people, that's exactly how they look at the church. They think that God is locked here in a little cage. But he's not. God is on the loose. And for a lot of people, that can be good news. For a lot of people, that is frightening news. So stories like we have heard, stories about Paul, who was happy going after the Christians, stories about St. Francis, who was happy with the good life, Stories about C.S. Lewis, who was happy being an active magician. Stories about Francis Thompson, who was happy in his addiction. These stories ought to be a jolt to our sense of identity. I mean, what if there really is a God? And what if this God knows me, loves me, and is after me? What if this God won't rest until God has his way with me? What if God shows up and changes everything, transforms my life from the way it is now to the way that it is supposed to be? I mean, such thoughts should scare you. As the prophet once said, it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. By that I presume to mean it's no big deal to fall into the hands of a dead God. Because a dead God, after all, won't do anything to challenge you or to change you or in any way to mess up your life with the living God. Now, that's a different story. A living God will always have his way with you. And you had better worry, because in the final analysis, this living God will destroy any thought that you have that you are in control of your life. Lutheran theologian Robert W. Jensen once put it this way: you can tell the difference between a true and living God and a dead and false God, because a fake God will never surprise you. Do you like surprises? If it's like one of those surprises that mom and dad received to see their son that they hadn't seen for 7 months plus, I say, bring it on. But if it's a surprise birthday party, I say, pass. But if it's a surprise that God is working in my life, I really have nothing to say about that, because God is going to do what God is going to do. And part of the excitement of life is sitting back and watching what God is doing, how God is unfolding God's reality in other people's lives. Maybe one of the most common prayer requests that I get here at Christ Lutheran Church comes from a mom or a dad or sometimes a grandparent, and they're worried about their son, their daughter, their grandchild, because these parents try to raise their kids in faith, but now faith seems so distant from those parents. I was talking to one such mother just recently. Now, I've known this mother for more than 10 years. I know the intricacies of her family life, and I know that there is a son who is distant from the family and who is distant from God. And this mother prays constantly for this son. Almost every week I get an update to what's going on. Finally, one day, just a couple of weeks ago, the mother said to me, "Good news, prayers are being answered." I asked her to describe what's going on. She said her son was recently invited to a church by his girlfriend, and he went. Now, make no mistake, God will use raging hormones to get God's way. And I said, I mean, that's terrific. And the mom tempered that a little bit and said, you know, baby steps. Just baby steps, but I'll take them. If you have a mother, or better than that, if you have a grandmother who is praying for you, and you couple that with this determined pursuing God, you don't stand a chance. Because God is on the loose. Jesus is the resurrected God. And in his resurrection, he is declaring that his rising, God will have the final word. God will have the final word in death and sin, yes. But maybe more importantly today, God will have the final word in your life. I'm going to close in prayer this morning, and if you've never prayed the prayer that I'm going to pray, I invite perhaps that my words will be your words today, as we allow God to do a surprising, forgiving, life-giving work in our lives. Let's pray. God, I'm tired of running away from you. I'm tired of living life on my own, because I have made a mess of things, and it will take a miracle to get things fixed. But I'm trying to believe that you are truly the Son of God. I'm trying to believe that you really came out of the tomb alive. Surprise me, Lord. Come into my life and make a difference, not just for right now, but forever. Amen.